This video was made possible by our patrons.
No, you're not.
Hi guys, we've got Luke over there just chilling. We're in for another podcast of Metabreakers and we're talking about monsters today. I was sort of taken to the lead of this because Luke's being a silly goose and Fabian's pulling an Archeon Star Drake out of a portal that he's been winning every tournament with at the minute. He's just cradling it like a baby. So
he can't walk without it. Don't disrespect it.
it's Kane for walking through Warhammer. So the premise of the show today is just talking about monsters, how they fit in the new edition, how they'll fit in your army list, and how they fit in each mission of the list, and how tactical you can be with them. And we'll just get straight into it.
Monsters good.
Yeah,
monsters good. Yeah, and yeah, let's get into it. I think the answer is that we're sort of going to discover is just it's a bit complicated. Or yes, it's going to be yes, but also there are some nuances to it.
It's knowing which monsters to use.
Yeah, and how many, and how to use them. But yeah, I think the short answer is yes. Monsters are good. You're going to be seeing a lot of monsters playing AOS 3, and I think that there's sort of two types of monsters, right? There's hero monsters and non-hero monsters. Archeon is a monster, and so is a Fomeroid Crusher. So it's not a one-size-fits-all description for monster. But yeah, I think a good way to start is to get into how rules have changed for monsters. Why are we talking about it now? And basically for people who haven't played much match play yet, this season of match play is in Gur, the Realm of Beasts.
Gur. And
so they basically added to the General's Handbook, so to the way you play match play, they've added a bunch of extra rules for things that monsters can do. And the most prevalent ones are the battle tactics. So 6 out of the 8 battle tactics, we'll go into them later in terms of when you're scoring them, but 6 out of the 8 battle tactics you get extra points for completing them with monsters, as well as the fact that every time you kill a monster, or once per battle round, you will get an additional, not a battle tactic point, but an additional 1 victory point. And so if you have the monsters and your monsters are dying, then you will be giving up 1 victory point. There's also a spell to turn your hero into a monster, turn any hero into a monster. So if you don't have one in your list, you can sort of temporarily get one for some of these battle tactics. And there's also a command ability that allows your monster to fight as if it was on its top bracket. So if it degrades as it gets wounded, you can soup it up. So yeah, that's basically the rundown of sort of the changes to match play for monsters. And so I think your sort of first thought can be, okay, I'm gonna keep my old list and add 1 monster to it, something like that. But it's not always that simple. So I think that's the rundown of how it works. And let's pass it over to someone else. Start us talking about what that means for list building in general, and then we might move more on to specifics and other stuff.
Yeah, well,
we listening, mate. For the newer players, for Luke, who's not really played any tournament games yet, just to make sure you listen to JP there, bro.
Yeah, well, so large part of the game is battle tactics. That's as long as you're getting them right, that's where you're gonna get your wins from.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of games are tight, and if you're not scoring them battle tactics, and
yeah, they're worth about as many points as the primary objectives. So yeah, you do want to be scoring battle tactics, and there are games are close. Again, in AOS 2, I think it was a bit more one person would get control of all of the objectives turns 2 or turn 3. You'd have killed a couple of the main threats, you'd have established dominance on the objectives, and you'd sort of run away with this mathematically uncatchable lead. Whereas in AOS 3, the objectives tend to be worth a little bit less. There tends to be this sort of 1-2 more scoring. So you're sort of getting 3 points per turn for the main objectives, a couple exceptions, but 3 points, and then also 2 to 3 points for battle tactics. And so, as Lucas said, if you're getting your battle tactics right, then you can actually compete a lot of the time, even if, say, you're only holding one of the objectives out of 4 or 5 objectives. So it is important to focus on those battle tactics, and again, you're going to be getting points for those from monsters. So, then the question becomes, basically, the premise is what you're building your list. You're you haven't previously really used monsters in your list. Like, how does it change your list building? What are you dropping for monsters? How are you sort of constructing that? And so I think we can do probably a quick little thing about talking about armies that we've done, except for obviously Luke, who's never played a tournament before. So Fabian, I think you can sort of start us. You got the biggest, baddest monster around right now, or one of them at least. So how have you found, like, sort of, because I know you've played a bunch of Tzeentch before. I don't know if you've played a lot of Archaon, but he's sort of been upgraded with these new monster rules. How have you found that coming into your games, like the extra battle tactic scoring, the monstrous rampages? That's another thing we didn't mention. Is monsters get at the end of the charge phase, they can sort of stop command abilities or do some mortal wounds or stuff like that. So playing Archaon now that he's got these upgraded monster rules, how have you sort of found that coming into your games?
Yeah, so my list is Archaon and Kairos, so 2 monsters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I was just going to say, like, obviously we'll probably get back more into it, but as far as what I've seen tournament-wise, match play, like,
Mm-hmm.
no more than 2 monsters, I would say.
As in, you've never seen more than 2 in a list?
No. So what I was saying is I wouldn't really run more than 2.
Oh, yeah.
For me personally, I wouldn't run more than 2 monsters, like, in a list, unless it was, they were really good, like Be'lakor, Kairos, etc. Unless, and this is sort of another point. Unless your army is designed to beat monsters like Sons of Behemoth,
or
X, Y, and Z.
more tribes.
Like Seraphon, they've got like a monster build. The reason being is because there's things like denying your opponent a battle tactic, like bring it down, like to kill a monster.
Yeah,
like having something that's really unkillable is really important. So battle tactics are massive in tournaments. Getting the extra points. You definitely need a monster in there to get extra points, like we were talking about monstrous rampage, etc. To actually achieve these. But you can get away with just one that is really hard to kill because you have the spell that you can turn a smaller character into a monster. So like you can achieve those tactics without it's almost like you're denying your opponent. I mean, Archaon's like the perfect example because he's very, very hard to kill. Already you put him in Tzeentch.
Yeah.
He's ridiculous with Destiny dice. You add Kairos, and all of a sudden, Kairos and Archaon are just. And
Kairos, I think again, people are thinking of like kill a battle tactic to kill a battle line or a general with a monster. What jumps to at least my mind is the melee, but Kairos can, zap him for 6 mortal wounds through a portal.
Yeah. And
you're still scoring your battle tactic for killing them with the monster. So.
Yeah. I mean, I did that at Carnage against Mathmallow. Is Sylvaneth. He had the what are they called? The 5-man units that jump around everywhere, teleport.
Oh yeah, the Revenants.
Yeah, so he had a unit of those, and they literally just portals straight through Kairos' spell, killed the battle line unit with a monster, and that was like from the other end of the board. So it's like, it is very important to have monsters in this edition. Definitely embrace it, and I think you need to have a monster that's like kind of hard to kill. That's what I would suggest anyway. Like.
Yeah, I mean, in general, right, when you're bringing something like a monster, a lot of points invested in one unit, you don't want it necessarily to be super easy to kill. And I think that is sort of one of the points is, I think people, like, you sort of want to avoid being like, okay, I'm just going to add one monster to my list because I would like to do some of these battle tactics. And you just sort of add a low points, not very good monster. It doesn't end up scoring you many battle tactics because it can't kill much. And it eventually dies and concedes 1 point. I think it's sort of like, again, you just want to be considering how those monsters are fitting into your list. And also, I think overall, again, I think there is a little bit of like, you don't want to compromise your list too much to get monsters into it, Like those extra points are good, but if you've made your list worse to the extent that it's struggling a lot, it's not quite going to be. You're still going to end up losing the game because you're just going to lose too much of your army or not be able to kill enough of theirs or something like that. But anyways, so that's Tzeentch. So Liam, I know you're a big Orcs fan, right? We talked previously about dealing with Gotrek with the buffed up, what's he called, the Rockman, the Rogue Idol.
Still sat next to me.
And
You.
always at all times. And also, I know you're thinking about, a lot of us are thinking about Megagarg and things. So, yeah, what are your thoughts on monsters in your like? How's it featuring in your list building and stuff like that?
Even before the new edition, I'd run double Crusher.
Yeah.
A lot of the time, just because it's fun. But like, people often think with more Crushers, you would just throw them in, they'll die instantly, and you wouldn't get that much points back. But I'm one of the few people that literally wait till turn 3 when they can make a big impact, and I can get those bigger blobs off. Because how I did it, I'd had big War, and I had massive units of Savage Orcs with swords, spears and shields. So I'd literally just wear them down, and then have these 2 Hammer Anvil units just go around the back and wiping everything off. And then every unit that they easily kill, they get more attacks to nuke the next unit. Or even potentially do the more Crusher charge, where they kill a unit in the charge, and they can charge again, and keep on doing that. But in the new edition, it's a lot more interesting, because obviously you've got Roars, you've got Stomps, and monsters are just a lot more, in the games. And more Crushers specialise at just doing tons of damage in one go. So they can probably, one-shot most monsters in the game. Even Archeon with a fully buffed Maw Crusher will just go in one go. They're very much a hammer.
He isn't also fully buffed.
Yeah, true. But I quite like all the current Orc monsters, but we need to see the new ones, because I reckon there's gonna be some sneaky stuff going on there. I reckon I'm hoping they're like the Beastman monsters, so they've got their own little niche.
Really, really good.
Yeah, really good.
So for you, you're a bit of a monster main, anyways, and you're just loving it, loving extra buffs. And I think Maw Crushers are a great example. And I know +1 to save isn't monster specific, but when you've already got a good save like on the Maw Crushers, getting that +1 to save, you're getting even more mileage out of that damage reduction, and they can sort of, like what Fabian was saying, they are going to be alive and scoring a lot, and not scoring a lot, then also just killing a lot. So yeah, that's good. And then we get on to Luke. So Luke, we're talking about Age of Sigmar, if you remember that game, So yeah, you've been building all sorts of lists as far as I can see. But yeah, so why don't you talk about some of your armies and how monsters are fitting into that list building?
So I think you can build lists that don't need any monsters just because of the monster spell. But as you're finding as we're going through everyone, that monster heroes are way better just because they can put points on themselves, buff themselves, and heal themselves with heroic actions and all that kind of stuff. I think normal standard monsters you probably don't put in any, but if you want to be really competitive, you probably don't take them.
Just not taking unmounted zombie dragons and stuff.
You gain all these points, your bleeding points. If you've got an easy monster to kill, it can just double stack as well. So like some of the battle tactics, if you're a hero monster and you go in and kill another monster, all of a sudden the points just really swing. Then you can get like four or 5 points from battle tactic, just because they've got an easy monster to kill. So I think what we're going to find is just going to see a lot of hero monsters.
Yeah.
Maw Crusher, Nagash, Archeon, all the anything that's got a free up save that can be boosted up.
Yeah.
And basically be ethereal with save stacking. I think that you need to have a monster in your list as long as your list design is built to do these battle tactics and deny people battle tactics. So if you've got a lot of tanky units that can sit on objectives, denying your opponent, doesn't matter if he's got a really hitty, killy character, if he goes flying onto this objective and gets stuck on a unit, and he's not getting you these extra points, and he's also a lot of points, and he's not really doing much. So a lot of lists will, because it's just fun, isn't it? It's fun to have an elite army, a hero monster, but don't just think the whole game everybody's going to have monsters left, right, and center. You'll see like those wind foxes, that kind of list doesn't have a monster in it. Ninehorn, I know probably doesn't seem competitive, but you can get big tanky blocks that doesn't really have a monster in it. Some Seraphon builds don't really need monster. It's just that spell you can. I think using that spell at the right time, so you say you cast a spell on a hero and you make it easy for that hero to get killed, then you're bleeding another point.
Yeah.
You do it in a way where you know that hero is safe. You can just get the spell off and get the points. So, yeah. It's really interesting. So, are monsters good? Yes, but only certain types of monsters and certain types of situations, which is what we're slowly finding. I mean, another thing is Gargants can be put into everybody's army. They're like a hero monster that everybody can have. I mean, that's probably not a bad idea to put that in your list. I mean, you've been using a Gargant. Yeah, I bet you found the tanks and
exactly.
You find the Gargant, but it counts as five models now. So capture and stuff, even though he's allied in.
Yeah. So he counts as 5, and as you say, he just tanks, right? Like, it is like, as we were talking about, if you have a monster that scores you one extra battle tactic, and then eventually dies, you're sort of neutral. You know, that might as well not have been a monster. You've conceded 1 victory point and you've gained 1 victory point. So you sort of, in order for a monster to be effective, you need to score 2 battle tactics from him being a monster. And Gargant's obviously very good at that because they've got 35 wounds. You know, which is just a lot. Armies have gotten smaller, all that in Chaos 3. It's just a lot to go through. And so you're going to get that mileage. What I did, so I played a Gits list where I had the Mega Gargant, and then I also had the Web Spinner Shaman, so on the big spider. I also had a Mangler boss. And so I sort of had and I had Scragrot, who could turn himself into a monster with the spell. And I think so. What I found a lot of the time is the battle tactic I scored. I think that I saw my opponents not score is running 3 models within 3 of each other, and you get an extra point if they're all monsters. And that I really never saw. I don't think I ever saw anyone else score. So what I would normally do is I would keep my monsters so I could run them if I needed to, but I would normally transform Scragrot into a monster and run him and 2 of them together. Because I don't have a big alpha strike, often I was given turn 1. And so that you get that off, and that's just sort of 1 free point that often your opponent isn't getting back right on the first turn of the game. And then you start getting into, okay, well, I'm going to be scoring the normal battle tactics that people are scoring with monsters. So in my case, I sort of went for an oversaturation of monsters. But it is important that you play reasonably carefully with the small ones. So Bundo, the Mega Gargant, he was normally my front and center guy. You know, I could use him. Doesn't do that much damage, but I can use him to kill 5 or 10 direwolves and score me another point. And I'm not really afraid of him dying immediately on the backswing because he's got so many wounds. But with the other monsters, as you say, you've got to be a little bit careful because, you know, a 12 wound loon boss on a Mangler Squig is going to die fairly easily. And then he just concedes that point, and then you're not really making a profit. The Web Spinner Shaman, a bit of both worlds. Like I gave him the 5-up ward. He has a -1 to hit spell. So again, he was sort of built into being tanky, being a wizard, and sometimes he's scoring the battle tactic because again, doesn't do very much damage by himself. But you can give him Arcane Bolt for D3 mortal wounds. You can use the Monstrous Rampage for D3 mortal wounds, and you can put him into a small battle line unit that's, you know, maybe just a screen or something like that. You put him in, you get 3 points for destroying a battle line unit with a monster, and then again, he's probably not going to die on the backswing to anything little. But yeah, so I basically just had enough monsters to saturate my list, and I scored the most victory points by far at the tournament. And part of that is just because I was always getting bonus points for these battle tactics, and that was by having an oversaturation of monsters and multiple tanky monsters.
You're forgetting your most important buff.
Oh no, what is it?
The big moon that shines down.
Yeah,
The moon.
the moon. Yeah, I mean, the moon is also good. I mean, it's giving me pluses to cast. It's giving the loon boss. This sort of, again, the way I play the loon boss is I leave him at the back, and then when the moon comes up, he can run in charge. So he's going 4d6, which is, you know, anywhere from, once he moves 6, once he moves 19. And so, again, you're holding him, and then you're zooming him across the board and scoring a battle tactic with him. You know, slay the warlord or bring it down. And And then so you're like, okay, worst case, he dies on the, maybe I'll get a bad priority or whatever. He dies on the backswing and he has only gotten me 1 point and cost me 1 point. But he's in terms of, so he'd be neutral on victory points, but he's often sort of worth less in my list than whatever he kills. If he kills something like Vordry, he's getting more than his points back. If he's killing a Mega Gargan, he's getting more than his points back. So it's like, okay, worst case, he was neutral on victory points, but sort of positive on points economy. But I think the main thing is that these are the types of things you're thinking about when adding your monsters to your list. Is like, how am I leveraging them to get me points and not make my list worse? I don't think it's not at the stage where you're just like, well, if anything in your army has monster on its war scroll, you should just slap it in there. You want to be thinking, okay, it's like, I think what we might see a little bit of is just armies that already had reasonable monsters will be like, okay, well, we can invest a bit more into those monsters because, it's better to have them. More than, as you say, Nighthaunt, KO. I don't know if you necessarily want to take a Mega Gargan in KO. I'm not sure. I probably would, but I'm not sure if it's right.
It's going to buff some lists and weak others. There's just a lot of thought in your list writing now as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like you had more monsters, it worked for you for that run thing, but I definitely wouldn't build a list just to try and get that extra point in that battle tactic.
Exactly. Like it was sort of at the point where I had sort of one really tanky monster, one wizard monster who was like a buff piece anyways, and is often run in Gloomspike Giths, and then the Loon Boss who was a damaging monster. And it's sort of like, okay, I'm getting that one free battle tactic, those sort of 3 points, which is nice. But yeah, it's not, I wouldn't add 3 little monsters to your list just to always score that battle tactic. Absolutely. You want to be thinking, okay, now, I think maybe it's like half list building, which is if you have good monsters, feel free to put them into your list now if you were sort of on the fence. But the other thing is, like, one of the big reasons monsters are good is because of these extra points from battle tactics, and that's sort of how you should be playing them. Like, you should sort of be playing them around the fact of, okay, like, I want to score extra points every single turn. If you've invested, like I had, if you've invested 1,000 points in monsters, you want to be saying, okay, I need to be scoring I want to be scoring ideally 5 extra points every single game from monstrous battle tactics. You want to avoid, some armies, like if you're KO, you're like, okay, well, it's just as good for me to get aggressive expansion, hold 2 objectives, as it is to score any other battle tactic. Whereas for me, one of the things I was doing was like, okay, I really want to get Savage Spearhead, which is 2 units in your opponent's territory, which is sort of on some maps quite hard to do. But it's like, again, I want to make sure I'm scoring the ones that get me extra points from monsters, because that is one of the strengths of my list. And some of that you can do without even having good monsters. So
it's not the end of the world if you've got too many monsters in your list, because that extra point you only get 1 for.
Yes.
If you kill all 4, you're only getting 1, so you can force your opponent into a position where
they have to kill 2 in one turn.
So they need to deal with all of them. But if I kill them all, then I'm not getting the value in the
exactly. And it's per battle round 1 point. So if you charge your monster in and it dies on your turn, and then you lose priority and they kill another monster, they're still only getting 1 point from that. So yeah, it's as with a lot of things in Warhammer, sometimes if you sort of either want to oversaturate the amount of targets they have, so it's like, oh, how are they going to deal with all of these monsters, or undersaturate, where you just say, I'm not going to give them any monsters to get those points. But again, I think the main point we've sort of touched on here is that you want to be aware of it in list building. So if you're not going to bring monsters, you want to say, okay, how am I going to kill all the monsters that I'm going to play against? Stuff like that.
So, I'm thinking, what kind of list would you run now that you've had tournament games?
Honestly,
I go about building the majority of your lists now.
I honestly think, I know we mentioned it. I can see Mega Gargants making it into a lot of lists. I think one of the things is, if you're playing a top faction, you're playing your Tzeentch or Lumineth Realm Lords or Seraphon or something like that, right? One of these best factions. You're probably in the position where you're like, I don't need to compromise my list. I can make a strong enough list without having to worry about scoring extra points from battle tactics, etc. But if you're playing one of these, a sort of weaker faction, you can be like, okay, well, adding a Mega Gargan in allows me this, this one unit that probably won't die, can do some damage, can fight, and doesn't require buffs and stuff and synergies to operate that might be expensive in your list. And you can add him, and you're just like, okay, now I've got, they're expensive, they're 500 points, but you can say, okay, look, I built 500 points into my list that's going to be scoring, going to function by itself, and hopefully get me these extra points that maybe the normal units in my battle tome wouldn't be as good for getting. That's for me. But also, if I was building a faction with no monsters, like KO or Nighthaunt, I wouldn't worry about adding a Mourngul in. I wouldn't add a Mourngul into Nighthaunt because it's not a great monster, and I don't think what you'll get back from it is enough to sort of make it worth making your list weaker.
Fabian, I mean, you've just come back from a tournament yesterday. You didn't use Kairos, so how did you find not having that second monster in using? You just had Archeon and a load of little heroes.
It was like I had to rely on Archeon to. If I'm thinking about it, I didn't really score. I think over the 3 games I played, I missed that second monster 1000% because I hardly scored the extra point for any of my rounds. So I tend to be scoring like 5 points a round. I mean, it was a team tournament, so it's a bit different how it was played as you would normally play against one guy, if you see what I mean. But so the rounds and the matchups are decided for me rather than not, if you see what I mean. But yeah, I really missed the second monster massively because I had the squishy heroes. So I ran Archeon and then five small characters. It was like what we talked about earlier. I couldn't really get any of my characters in a position where I could turn them into a monster, get over to be attacktive without giving it that point straight back to my opponent. Yeah. So it wasn't worth turning into a monster until maybe turn 5.
When it's sort of the last thing you're doing.
So I really missed it, and it was mainly Archeon. But a lot of times, because Archeon's the big threat, it was they try and deny that battle tactic, and it's all about denying really. And in tournament play, especially, it's about denying rather than achieving, if you see what I mean. So every turn you're using that redeploy to block off a key charge for them to get into an objective, or for them to get into to kill my general, for instance. I'd redeploy Archeon, so they'd have to go into Archeon and the general and lose the unit. And you know what I mean, it's almost like denying your opponent rather than achieving. So it's a lot harder to get those battle tactics unless you are very much a dedicated monster army, like you said with your
If you're really setting yourself up with multiple angles to achieve it, right? Because I think another thing is you don't want to put, let's say you're like, okay, I'm going to play Nighthaunt and I'm going to add a Mourngul to my list for 400 points or however much they cost, right? You don't then want to say, okay, I'm going to put my Mourngul into 10 Direwolves and just get 1 extra point for it, because you're you still need to play the game, you still need to score objectives, you still need to kill your opponent. So if you are forced with your one monster to do stuff like kill a small battle line unit or something, that can just compromise your overall game plan. So
and they get charged and killed.
Exactly. So it's one of those things where you really do want to be like, okay, I have a spare monster who I can put over here, who's like the wizard. The spider shaman is a great example, or even something like Kairos, where you can say, okay, look, there's one battle line unit over here on an objective by himself, or my opponent's warlord is a 5-wound hero who is exposed now for whatever reason, and then you can say, okay, I can put that monster, instead of leaving him just in my backline doing nothing, I can sort of put him over there, score an extra point, but my main threats are still front and center, so my opponent can't just kill them for free. And then, again, by doing that, you're coming out ahead, both in terms of the in-game progress and the battle tactic progress. But you don't want to just sit there and be like, okay, I've added 3 monsters to my list so I could run them all turn 1, and now I don't have anything good to do with them. And I'm just, I just eventually lose the game from dying.
We've got a question in the chat by Jeremy asking what monsters are our favourites. So we're going to start off with Luke over there. What's your favourite monster, Luke? What's your go-to monster that you spam?
The Mongol is my favourite.
The Mongol? Wait a second.
The Gatebreaker. The Gatebreaker is my favourite monster. The giant, the Gatebreaker.
I think it's the best. I think the Gatebreaker is like the best monster. Just looking at the scroll, no buffs from anywhere else, no allegiance abilities, etc. I think the Gatebreaker is actually the best fighter of all the monsters in AOS on pure scroll.
But not just for not everybody's into tournaments, competitive scene.
Yeah.
Like the Gatebreaker, just having a mercenary Gargan like a Gatebreaker. I like the Gatebreaker because it's rules, but any 4 of those Gargans you can put into your army, and you can just convert that model to fit your army. So
yeah, it's a really fun hobby opportunity.
Yeah.
Because it's a huge canvas too, right? Like you can sort of, you get this big guy obviously, but then you can stick on faction scenery onto him. You can stick on huge weapons from wherever else in your army. You can stick on small weapons like around his belt. Like you get as a hobbyist, you get really the opportunity to do whatever you want with them as a just a cool piece in your army. And I think it's really cool. And there's one per Grand Allegiance. So if you do make a really cool death themed one, there's that cool Nagash one I've seen. You make that, and then you're like, oh cool, I can use that in multiple death armies. And every time you play it, you can be like, okay, I'm gonna add, one little thing onto him. Okay, I played him in my OBR and he's got the skulls, and then you're like, actually, now I'm playing in my Soulblight Gravelords. He's still got the skulls, which still makes sense, but I'm also gonna add bats. I don't know what you add from Soulblight Gravelords, but whatever it is, you add it, you have a great time.
Bats and direwolves.
Yeah.
Fabian, what's your favourite monster?
Well, I love anything massive,
Oh, there we go. Remember, this is supposed to be child safe.
I just like big dragons. Absolutely love the big dragons and models, because I feel like this as similar to Gargants. They're blank canvases as well, so you can do loads of stuff with dragons. So I'm really excited about the Warhammer community, showing us pictures of dragons. So I'm just loving it. But yeah, anything dragons, and I'm really, really into my conversions at the moment. I'm really pushing myself as a hobbyist to try and convert something. I'm not as good as painter as these 3 guys on the screen here at all in the slightest. These guys are amazing. But I really love doing basing and converting big stuff. So yeah, the next projects I'm going to be doing is some big crazy conversions. But also I take a lot of inspiration because sometimes it's very hard to come up with original stuff. So I take a lot of inspiration from the internet, and I see conversions of people, and straight away I latch onto that and try and.
It's awesome, and I definitely as a slight tangent. I think Picasso was good artist copy and great artist steal or whatever, but it's such a you should definitely look at people's hobby stuff on the internet and all that, and steal those ideas. Because one thing is, it's totally fine to take inspiration from other places, but also the other thing is your model will never look exactly like their model that you're copying,
Yeah.
So you sort of start, you're like, I want mine to look exactly like this guy's. And then when you do it, it looks like people might not even recognize that they've come from the same place, because you're like, oh, actually, once I got to here, I didn't know how he did this, or I thought this would look a bit cooler. And I think in general, with monsters, conversions are, big models and monstrous conversions are a cool place to be.
Yeah, so that's where I'm at. Not really a specific model. I would say just anything. Your spider is fantastic. How it's hanging from midair, that sort of stuff.
The bigger the better for Fabian.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Some of Liam's conversions are amazing. I love Luke's painting style and stuff. So it's so I take inspiration from everyone around me and what I see. So I think that's probably why I like massive conversions. Go convert stuff, guys. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Push yourself.
Liam, you're next.
There's too many monsters, but I think my prominent one is the Stegodon. It's the Stegodon.
Here we go.
I honestly would run a list of just 8 of them, I'm not gonna like back down from this. I need 8 Stegodons in my list and Bastillodons. Dinosaurs everywhere.
Dinosaurs. There you go.
Dinosaurs.
A very fair answer. A very fair answer.
I mean, I've got a lot of like big scaly monsters like Maw Crushers, a couple of dragons, a load of Gorgons, stuff like that. But the most prominent, the Rogue Idol, of course, and like all the greater demons. Like I've done.
Oh yeah, the greater demons are awesome.
Done great and clean ones, Lords of Change, Bloodthirsters, and Keeper of Secrets. My Keepers list has got 3 of them in it, and then just a load of spam. I've also got Archeon up in the corner, and there's a load of other like smaller ones.
So you're just the monster keyword, basically.
Yeah. But if I had to choose one, it would 100% be a Stegodon. Mainly for the it's perfect. It's got a range shot that's got 3 shots, freeze, -1 rend and 3 damage. That's pretty nice. It's decent in combat with a 4 damage output of the horns, and the rest of it's like freeze, -1, 2 damage. Most of the units in this current edition are MSU, so there's a lot of 5-man units where you get the bonus from the special rule on the Stegodon, where you get +1 to save. You can charge into multiple units and do D3 mortal wounds on a 2-up to each of them, and they're just beasts.
Liam, I'm just glad you never released that battle report where you shot all 4 of my web spinner spiders off the board in 2 turns.
So this is just a quick rundown. It's not going into depth. I had 8 Stegodons, one of which was a Engine of the Gods, and one of was a Skink Chief on Stegodon. So Luke had 4 web spinner like Arachnaroks and a load of smaller spiders on the board. In the first turn or the second turn, all of the Arachnaroks were dead, and a few of the smaller spiders were dead.
And then I found the flip button on TTS and
just went.
Hey, look, still only give away 1 point for killing all those monsters in 1 battle round there. So who's the real winner?
Me, because I went open the door, get on the floor, everyone do the dinosaur. I won that.
Well, I think we can end the monster show. Hopefully we've given people ideas on whether they think the monsters are good or not. I think there's not really an answer for that. Some monsters are good and some aren't. Even the ones that aren't might be good in certain lists, and you've got to build it. But as long as the main thing is you get this, read them thoroughly, and you're on for a good start for putting monsters in your list.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
I think it's also fair to say that we'll probably whether or not monsters are good, we'll probably see a lot of good lists that do have monsters in them. You know, like we're already seeing the god, Marathi, Archeon. There probably will be a lot of monsters out there to deal with, even if you don't end up playing them yourself.
So for the next show, got some exciting news. We're going to go into detail on it. JP, do you want to lead the outro?
Yeah, sure. So make sure you tune in next time because again, all this talk of the various higher and lower ranked armies, we are going to be getting back into the Metabreakers rankings. And so for people who don't know,
by a monster.
Monsters
rampage. Oh no,
my monster's on the bed. Aren't you? He's asleep.
Is it Chunk again?
He's just blends
making
into the
bed. But yeah, so Metabreakers, for people who don't know what it is, it's a rankings where basically you score when you go to events. You score points based on how you do relative to your faction. So if you sort of go 4-1 with Beast of Chaos, you're going to be scoring more points than winning an event with Zinch or Seraphon or something. So it's just a good way of recognizing people who are popping off on these off-meta factions. So we're going to be talking all about the new season of the rankings, and then also a big sort of final end-of-year event with the Metabreakers Masters. So yeah, make sure you tune in for that because there's going to be a lot of cool stuff talking about how that's going to go down this year.
Yeah, so thanks for listening to this episode. Hopefully everyone liked it.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, get on Patreon so we can not stalk about Stegodons. I'll stalk about Stegodons, but we'll talk about Stegodons a lot.
Patreon. You said you're going to stalk people.
Just Stegodons. No, not people, Stegodons. Whatever.
Guys.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
This video is made possible by our patrons. If you want to know more about how to support us, click on the link to the right.